Dominic Vale had seen bodies in alleys, money in briefcases and tears in courtrooms, but nothing prepared him for the moment a little girl was tossed from a van like a broken bag of laundry and landed at his feet, alive, silent, and staring at him as if she already knew his name. The alley behind Vale's import office smelled like wet cardboard and old engine oil. Rain had just stopped, leaving the pavement glossy under the security lights. Two of Dominic's men stood by the back door, bored, smoking, pretending the night was normal. Dominic adjusted the cuff of his suit and listened to the city hum like a distant warning. Then the van turned the corner too fast, headlights off, tires whispering over puddles. It didn't slow much. The side door slid open. A small shape rolled out. The door slammed. The van disappeared like it had never existed. But before we continue, I want to make a very special invitation. Subscribe to the channel and leave your like. This helps me see that you support me and are enjoying my stories. And comment below which city you're watching us from. Now, let's continue. Dominic didn't move for a second. His mind tried to label what he was seeing. Package, message, bait. His instincts had kept him alive this long, and his instincts screamed the same word they always screamed when something looked too easy. Trap. He stepped closer anyway because even a man like Dominic Vale had rules, and one of them was simple. If a child was in the street, you didn't look away. The little girl couldn't have been more than 4. Her coat was too big, sleeves swallowing her hands. Her hair was tangled, damp at the ends. Dirt made soft streaks on her cheeks, but her eyes were clean, too clean, wide and dark and steady, like she'd already cried all her tears somewhere else. She didn't scream. She didn't run. She didn't reach for him. She just sat up slowly and looked at Dominic the way a judge looks at a defendant. One of his men, Luca, started forward. "Boss, don't—" Dominic lifted a hand. Luca froze. Dominic crouched, careful, keeping his body sideways in case someone had a gun trained on him from the roof. He scanned the windows, the fire escapes, the blind corners. Nothing. Just the drip of water and the faint buzz of a streetlight that needed replacing. He lowered his voice, the way you spoke to animals and scared people. "Hey, what's your name?" The girl blinked once. Her lips parted as if she was deciding whether the world deserved the answer. "Lily," she whispered. Dominic's throat tightened. Not because of the name itself, but because she said it like it had once belonged to someone else, like it had been taken and given back. "Okay, Lily." Dominic made his hands visible, palms open. "Where's your mum?" Lily's gaze slipped past him down the alley toward the street. Her small fingers gripped the concrete as if the ground was the only thing that wouldn't disappear. "She told them—" "I was heavy," Lily said. The words came out carefully, as if she'd practiced them. "They said, 'Throw it out.'" Dominic's chest went cold. His men shifted behind him. Even Luca stopped breathing. Dominic had heard a lot of ugly things. He'd made some of them happen, if he was being honest about the life he'd chosen. But hearing "throw it out" in a 4-year-old's voice did something to him that bullets never could. It didn't threaten his body. It threatened the parts of him he kept buried. He swallowed, forcing his face to stay calm. "Nobody's throwing you anywhere," he said. "Not while I'm here." Lily looked at him like she didn't believe in promises. Then, very slowly, she raised her hand. In her fist was a small object, squeezed so tight the skin around her knuckles had turned pale. She opened her fingers. It was a necklace. Cheap chain, worn links. But the pendant wasn't cheap. It was a tiny silver piece, shaped like a compass rose, with one point marked in black. Dominic's breath caught so hard he felt it in his teeth, because Dominic had seen that pendant before, not in a store, not in a photo, on a woman's neck, years ago, a night he'd never spoken about. A night that ended with a promise and a goodbye that tasted like blood in his mouth, even though there hadn't been any blood. His mind tried to shove the memory back down, but the necklace sat there in Lily's palm like a verdict. "Where did you get that?" he asked, voice rougher than he meant. Lily's eyes softened in a strange way, like she recognized something in him too. "It's mine," she said. "It's from my dad." Dominic didn't flinch. He didn't let his face change. He couldn't. Men survived around him by reading his expressions, by predicting his next move, by guessing which way the knife would fall. If Dominic showed anything, the whole room, this alley, this city, would smell weakness. But inside him, something cracked. Because Dominic Vale didn't have kids, that's what he told himself, that's what he'd built his life around. No attachments, no loose ends, no soft spots. You could love a woman if you were careful, but you never left a piece of your future in someone else's hands. He stared at the necklace, then at Lily's face, searching for similarities he refused to acknowledge. The curve of her eyebrows, the small, stubborn set of her jaw, the way she watched him, not scared, just alert. Dominic stood up slowly. His knees felt heavier than they should. Luca leaned in, voice low. "Boss, you want me to call the cops? Or you want me to find out who dumped her?" Dominic looked down at Lily again. She held the necklace like it was the only proof she existed. Like if she let it go, the world might decide she was trash after all. Dominic made a decision so fast it scared him. He shrugged off his suit jacket and wrapped it around Lily's shoulders, covering her thin coat, hiding her from cameras, from eyes, from anyone who might see her and think she was leverage. Lily didn't resist. She simply looked up at him, letting the jacket swallow her like shelter. "No cops," Dominic said. Luca's eyes widened. "Boss?" Dominic's stare shut him down. "If someone dumped a kid behind my building, it's not a coincidence, it's a message. And I don't let other people write messages on my doorstep." He crouched again, closer this time. "Lily," he said softly, "do you know where you came from tonight? Do you remember anything, a street, a sign, anything?" Lily frowned, thinking hard. Then she shook her head. "It was dark, but I heard music." Her voice got smaller. "And a lady was crying. And she said, 'He'll kill me if he finds out.'" Dominic's stomach twisted. He, in Lily's world, wasn't a father. He was a threat. Dominic glanced at his men. "Clear the alley. Check the cameras. Find that van." "Yes, boss," Luca said immediately, urgency replacing his earlier hesitation. Dominic lifted Lily gently, surprised by how light she was. She didn't cling to him. She didn't bury her face in his shirt. She sat in his arms like she was waiting for the next part of the story, not sure if it would end with warmth or with cold pavement again. As Dominic carried her inside, the office lights felt too bright, too clean for what he'd just witnessed. His men moved with new purpose, voices sharp, footsteps quick. Dominic walked past the front desk, past the fake invoices and the framed certificates that meant nothing. He headed toward the private elevator that led up to the townhouse floors above, the place he kept locked away from everyone except himself. He should have handed her off to someone, a nanny, a doctor, a charity, anyone normal. But Dominic wasn't normal, and the necklace in her hand had turned the world into something else. Lily looked around, taking in the marble, the quiet, the expensive silence. Then she looked back at Dominic. "Are you mad at me?" she asked. Dominic felt the question hit him like a punch. He forced his voice to stay steady. "No," he said. "I'm mad at the people who made you think anyone should be mad at you for being alive." Lily's mouth trembled just once. She pressed the necklace to her chest. Dominic stepped into the elevator, the doors sliding shut behind them. For the first time in years, he felt something more dangerous than fear. Hope. Because if Lily's necklace meant what he thought it meant, then someone had lied to him for 4 years. And Dominic Vale didn't forgive lies. Not when they cost a child her worth. Not when they came wrapped in silver and shaped like a compass, pointing straight back to his past. Dominic Vale had survived by never letting the past breathe. But that night, as the elevator rose in silence, it pressed against his ribs like a second heart. Lily rested against his chest, light enough that he could feel every breath she took. She smelled like rain, dust, and something faintly sweet. Cheap soap, maybe from a shelter, or a bathroom sink she didn't own. Dominic adjusted his grip without thinking, instinctively shielding her head as the elevator hummed upward. The doors opened into his private floor. No guards, no cameras visible. Just quiet, polished wood and the faint scent of old books and expensive whiskey. A place built for solitude, not children. Lily lifted her head and looked around with open curiosity. "Is this a hotel?" she asked. Dominic almost smiled. Almost. Something like that. He carried her into the living room and set her gently on the couch. She bounced slightly, surprised by the softness, then froze, as if worried she wasn't allowed to touch it. Dominic noticed immediately. "It's okay," he said. "You can sit." Lily nodded, still cautious, hands folded tightly in her lap. The necklace lay against her coat like a secret she didn't fully understand. Dominic stood there for a second, unsure what came next. In his world, problems were solved with phone calls, threats, and money. Children didn't fit into that system. Especially not children who might carry his blood. He walked to the bar out of habit, then stopped. He turned back, opened the fridge instead, and pulled out a bottle of water. He crouched and handed it to her. Thirsty. Lily took it with both hands and nodded. She drank slowly, carefully, like someone used to rationing. Dominic watched her drink and felt a strange pressure behind his eyes. He turned away before his menacing reputation could crack in front of a 4-year-old. "Someone's going to come check you," he said. "A doctor, just to make sure you're okay." "Am I sick?" Lily asked quietly. "No," Dominic said too fast. "You're just tired." She considered that, then nodded again, as if tired was something she understood very well. A soft knock came at the door. Dominic stiffened. He crossed the room and opened it just enough to let Luca step inside. Luca's voice was low. "Boss, we checked the cameras. Van had stolen plates, but we tracked its route. It came from Queens, stopped twice before dumping the kid." Dominic's jaw tightened. "Anyone following?" "No." "Good." Dominic hesitated. "Get Dr. Harris. Tell him it's a priority." Luca glanced past him, eyes landing on Lily. His expression shifted, less soldier, more human. "She okay?" Dominic answered without looking back. "She will be." Luca nodded and left. Dominic closed the door and leaned his forehead against it for a brief second, just long enough to let the weight settle, not long enough to be seen. When he turned around, Lily was watching him closely. "You're sad," she said. Dominic blinked. "No," he said automatically. Lily tilted her head. "My mom said that when she was sad too." The words hit him harder than any accusation ever had. Dominic crossed the room and sat on the chair opposite her, lowering himself so they were closer to eye level. "Your mum," he said carefully. "Do you remember her name?" Lily frowned, thinking. "Emma," she said. "But sometimes she cried and said she shouldn't have come back." "Back." Dominic's chest tightened again. He kept his face neutral, but his mind was already racing. Names, timelines, memories he'd buried on purpose. "Did Emma ever talk about me?" he asked, then immediately hated himself for asking. Lily shrugged. "She said my dad was scary, but not bad. She said he protected people, and that he didn't know about me." The room felt suddenly smaller. Dominic stood up, pacing once, twice. His life replayed itself in fragments. Late nights, deals made in shadows, a woman who'd walked away because she refused to raise a child in blood and fear. A woman who'd said, "If I ever have a daughter, she won't belong to your world." He had believed that meant she'd chosen someone else. He had never considered that she'd chosen silence. The doorbell rang softly. Dominic turned as Dr. Harris entered. Older, discreet, trusted. He examined Lily with gentle hands and softer words, checking bruises, listening to her breathing, asking simple questions. "She's dehydrated, exhausted," Dr. Harris said finally, "but no serious injuries. Whoever had her didn't hurt her physically." Dominic nodded. "Thank you." After the doctor left, Dominic carried Lily to the guest bedroom. He sat beside her as she lay under clean sheets, eyes fluttering heavy. "Are you leaving?" she asked suddenly. Dominic shook his head. "No." She studied his face for a long moment, then reached out and touched his hand. Her fingers were warm, trusting, dangerous. "Okay," she said, and fell asleep. Dominic stayed there long after her breathing evened out. He watched the rise and fall of her chest, the way she curled toward the pillow like she'd learned to make herself small. That night, Dominic Vale made another decision. He wasn't just going to find who dumped Lily. He was going to find who made her disposable. And when he did, the city would remember that some lines, even in his world, were never meant to be crossed. Dominic Vale didn't sleep. He sat in the armchair outside the guest bedroom, the city spread below him through tall windows, lights blinking like signals he'd once trusted more than people. Every sound inside the apartment registered sharply: the hum of the refrigerator, the faint tick of a clock, the soft shift of Lily turning in her sleep. For years, Dominic had believed that control meant distance. You didn't stay close to what could hurt you. You didn't watch people breathe. You didn't wait outside doors. Yet there he was, counting breaths that weren't his. At dawn, Lily padded into the hallway barefoot, hair sticking up in soft rebellion. She carried the compass necklace in her fist, like a habit she hadn't learned how to break. "You didn't leave," she said. Dominic stood slowly, joints stiff. "I said I wouldn't." She nodded once, satisfied. Then she looked around the apartment again, this time with more confidence. Do you live alone? Yes. Why? The question was innocent. The answer wasn't. Dominic cleared his throat. Because I made choices. Lily accepted that like it explained everything. Children didn't demand full truths. They just needed something that sounded solid. He made breakfast. Eggs, toast, fruit he rarely touched. Lily watched from the counter stool, swinging her legs. You cook like my mum, she said. She cooked when she was nervous. Dominic's hands paused. Was she nervous a lot? Lily shrugged. When men came. When phones rang. Dominic felt a familiar anger stir, slow and dangerous. He masked it by sliding a plate toward her. Eat, he said gently. She did, carefully at first, then with surprising hunger. Dominic watched, memorizing the way she pushed food to the edge of the plate before eating it, as if saving it for later. Mid-morning, Luca arrived with updates. Dominic listened from the office, door half closed, Lily coloring on the living room rug. The van belonged to a shell company, Luca said, connected to Victor Hale. Dominic's expression didn't change. Inside, something went cold. Victor Hale wasn't just competition. He was a lesson. A man who used fear the way others used money. A man Dominic had refused to partner with years ago because Hale didn't respect limits, especially when it came to leverage. Why dump the kid here? Dominic asked. Luca hesitated. Message, or insurance. Hale's been looking for you. Dominic nodded. That made sense. Hale believed in pressure. In reminders. Keep digging, Dominic said. Quietly. Luca glanced toward the living room. Boss, what are you going to do about her? Dominic answered without hesitation. Protect her. Luca searched his face, then nodded, and left. That afternoon, Dominic took Lily outside for the first time. Sunglasses, hat, quiet street. He held her hand, not because she asked, but because he needed to feel that she was still there. They walked past a park. Lily stopped, eyes fixed on the swings. Can I? She asked. Dominic scanned the area, nodded. He pushed the swing gently. Lily laughed, soft at first, then full, unguarded. The sound hit Dominic harder than any threat. For a moment, the world felt different, less sharp, less inevitable. Then his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He answered without taking his eyes off Lily. Yes. A voice he recognized instantly. Calm, smiling. Dominic, I hear you found something that belongs to me. Dominic's grip tightened on the phone. You're mistaken, Victor Hale chuckled. Am I? Small girl, compass necklace, silver. You should really keep better track of your history. Dominic felt the ground tilt just slightly. You're done, he said quietly. Hale's voice stayed pleasant. I'm offering you a trade. You walk away from the docks deal. I forget the kid exists. Dominic watched Lily jump from the swing and run toward him, cheeks flushed, eyes bright. There's nothing to trade, Dominic said. Hale sighed theatrically. You always did think you were above consequences. Consider this a reminder. The line went dead. That night, Dominic locked the apartment down. Extra security. No windows uncovered. Lily sensed the change immediately. Are we in trouble? She asked, sitting beside him on the couch. Dominic considered lying. He chose something better. Someone wants something from me. They won't get it. Because of me? Dominic met her eyes. Because of them. She leaned into him, small body warm against his side. He didn't move away. Later, after she fell asleep, Dominic stood by the window and made a series of calls. Old favors, old debts. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't threaten. He didn't need to. Victor Hale had crossed a line that even the underworld understood, and for the first time in years, Dominic wasn't acting to preserve power. He was acting to preserve a future he hadn't known he wanted, one that slept down the hall, clutching a silver compass that pointed straight through his armor. By the fourth day, the city felt different to Dominic Vale. Not quieter, not safer, just closer. As if the walls had leaned in, listening. Lily adapted faster than he expected. She learned which floorboards creaked, which rooms were off-limits, which of Dominic's silences meant danger, and which meant thought. Children who had learned to survive learned patterns quickly. That scared him more than her fear ever could. Dominic spent the mornings with her, the afternoons dismantling a man. He took Lily to a private pediatric clinic under an assumed name. She held his hand the entire time, fingers curled around his like an anchor. When the nurse smiled too warmly, Lily leaned closer to Dominic's side. When the doctor asked questions, she looked to him before answering. Dominic noticed everything. "Has she been eating regularly?" the doctor asked. "Yes," Dominic said. Lily corrected him softly. "Now I am." The doctor glanced up, surprised. Dominic felt the weight of that single word settle into his chest like a stone. Now. After the appointment, Dominic bought Lily shoes that fit. She insisted on pink ones with lights in the soles. He didn't argue. When she ran down the sidewalk just to see them flash, Dominic turned away so his men wouldn't see his expression. In the evenings, when Lily slept, Dominic met with people who hadn't spoken his name in years. The first was a dock supervisor who owed Dominic his life. The second was a banker who'd laundered money for Victor Hale before realizing Hale didn't forgive mistakes. The third was a woman who ran numbers for everyone and loyalty for no one. Each conversation confirmed the same truth. Victor Hale wasn't just reckless, he was desperate. Hale's empire was bleeding. Law enforcement pressure. Internal fractures. Men who whispered instead of obeying. And desperation made men like Hale dangerous in unpredictable ways. Dominic sat alone in his office long after midnight, files spread across the desk. Lily's small pink shoe sitting incongruously beside them where she'd left it earlier. He picked it up, turned it over in his hand. Hale thought Lily was leverage. Dominic would teach him what leverage really was. The opportunity came sooner than expected. 2 days later, Dominic's security flagged a breach attempt, not on his home but on one of his shell warehouses in Brooklyn. A probe. Careless. Intentional. A message. Dominic didn't respond directly. He waited. That night, Lily had a nightmare. She woke crying, sharp and sudden, the sound slicing through Dominic's chest as if someone had cut a wire inside him. He was at her bedside before his mind caught up with his body. "It's okay," he said quickly, sitting beside her. "You're safe." She shook her head, tears streaking her cheeks. "They took me again. I couldn't see you." Dominic pulled her gently into his arms. She clung to his shirt, fists tight, breath hitching. "I'm here," he said, steady. "I'm not going anywhere." She sniffed, pressing her face into his chest. "Promise?" Dominic hesitated only a fraction of a second. "I promise." The word settled between them, heavy and binding. He stayed until she slept again. When he left the room, he closed the door quietly and stood there in the dark hallway longer than necessary. Promises were dangerous things. The next morning, Dominic changed tactics. He sent Lily away. Not far, not alone. To a guarded estate upstate, owned by someone who owed Dominic more than money. He explained it to Lily as a trip. "Just for a little while," he said, kneeling in front of her. "There are trees, horses, a big yard. Are you coming?" she asked immediately. "Soon," he said. She studied his face, searching for cracks. Then she nodded, trusting him with the kind of trust that couldn't be replaced if broken. When the car pulled away, Dominic didn't wave. He stood still, hands in his pockets, jaw tight. The moment she was out of sight, he became someone else. Dominic moved fast after that. He leaked information, carefully, precisely, about a false arms shipment coming through Hale's territory. He let Hale's people intercept it. The shipment was empty. The surveillance wasn't. Within 48 hours, 3 of Hale's captains were in custody, caught red-handed where Dominic had pointed the spotlight. Hale called that night. "You're getting sloppy," Hale said, the smile gone from his voice. "No," Dominic replied calmly. "I'm getting finished." Hale laughed, but there was a crack in it now. "You think this is about business? You think you scare me?" Dominic leaned back in his chair. "No, I think you're scared of losing." Silence stretched. "You still have the girl," Hale said finally. Dominic's voice hardened. "You never had her." Hale exhaled sharply. "You should have stayed out of my way. You should have stayed away from my doorstep." The call ended. Dominic stared at the phone for a long moment. Then he made one final call, this one to a federal contact who'd been waiting years for Hale to slip. He offered everything. Routes, names, accounts, not out of mercy, out of calculation. By dawn, the city buzzed with rumors, raids, arrests, seizures. Victor Hale vanished. Dominic stood by the window as the sun rose, the city stretching awake below him. For the first time since Lily had arrived in his life, the danger felt finite. But something else gnawed at him. He had won battles before, wars. This felt different, because winning meant coming back to a child who believed his promises without knowing what they cost. And Dominic Vale wasn't sure yet whether the man he was becoming could live up to the father she already thought he was. The estate upstate was quiet in a way Dominic Vale wasn't used to. No sirens in the distance, no engines idling outside, just wind moving through trees, and the soft sounds of guards shifting their weight as they did their jobs without being seen. Lily ran across the lawn the moment she saw him, shoes flashing with every step. Dominic knelt instinctively, catching her just before she collided with him. She wrapped her arms around his neck like she'd never let go again. "You came back," she said, relief spilling into her voice. "I told you I would," Dominic replied. She leaned back, studying his face, searching for something only she could see. "You look tired." Dominic almost laughed. "You could say that." They spent the afternoon walking the grounds. Lily collected leaves, rocks, things she decided were important. Dominic listened as she explained each one with complete seriousness. Every few minutes she reached for his hand just to make sure he was still there. But beneath the calm, Dominic felt the pressure building again, because Victor Hale hadn't been found, and men like Hale didn't disappear quietly. That evening, Dominic's phone buzzed with a secure message. Location confirmed. Abandoned church in Brooklyn. Hale was meeting what remained of his inner circle. Dominic stared at the screen for a long time. "Before we continue, tell me in the comments what you think of this story so far and what you would do in his place. Don't leave the video, because what comes next will give you chills." Dominic stood and walked to the edge of the estate, phone still in hand. The past waited for him in that message, demanding its final due. Lily followed him without being asked. "Are you going away again?" she asked. Dominic turned to her. This time he didn't dodge the truth. "I have to finish something." "Is it bad?" "Yes." She thought about that, then surprised him. "Will it make the bad man stop?" Dominic nodded slowly. "Yes." "Then you should go," Lily said simply. "But you have to come back." Dominic crouched so they were eye to eye. "I will." She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out the compass necklace. "You can borrow it," she said, pressing it into his palm. "So you don't get lost." Dominic closed his fingers around the metal. For the first time in his life, he felt something stronger than fear guiding him. The church was hollow, echoing, stained glass, shattered long ago. Hale stood near the altar, thinner than before, eyes sharp with hunger and panic. A few men flanked him, not many, not enough. "You sold me out," Hale said when Dominic stepped forward. "I finished you," Dominic replied. Hale laughed bitterly. "How think this ends with me in cuffs? You think the world changes because you played hero for one kid?" Dominic's voice was calm. "The world doesn't change. I do." Red and blue lights flooded the broken windows moments later. Hale spun, rage flashing across his face. "You chose her over everything," Hale snarled. Dominic met his gaze without flinching. "I chose responsibility." Hale was taken away screaming, cursing, promising revenge that would never come. When the doors slammed shut behind him, the church felt empty in a way that finally meant peace. Dominic returned to the estate before sunrise. Lily was waiting at the window. She didn't ask questions. She didn't need answers. She just took the necklace back and hugged him like she knew the storm had passed. That night, Dominic Vale slept without guarding the door. For the first time in years, Dominic Vale believed that endings were loud. Gunshots, sirens, bodies. Headlines that burned for a day and vanished the next. What he didn't expect was that the end of one life would arrive quietly, on a cold morning upstate, with a 4-year-old sitting cross-legged on the floor, struggling to tie her shoes. He watched Lily frown at the laces as if they were a puzzle designed to test her patience. She tugged, failed, sighed, and looked up at him. "They don't listen," she said. Dominic crouched beside her. "They never do at first." He guided her fingers slowly over and under, explaining without rushing. She copied him with intense focus, tongue peeking out the corner of her mouth. When she finally pulled the knot tight, her face lit up. "I did it," Dominic nodded. "You did." It was such a small thing, and it hit him harder than everything that had come before, because no one had ever taught him how to tie anything without cutting it loose afterward. Life after Victor Hale didn't snap back into place. It reshaped itself slowly, painfully. The city kept moving, Deals kept shifting, men kept calling Dominic's name like it still meant the same thing. But it didn't. Dominic began delegating more, disappearing from rooms where he used to dominate. Luca noticed. Everyone noticed. "You're pulling back," Luca said one afternoon, watching Dominic decline a meeting that would have once defined his week. "I'm choosing," Dominic replied. Lily started preschool under another name, in a quiet town where no one knew Dominic Vale. She clung to him the first morning, fingers gripping his coat. "You'll come back?" she whispered. "Yes," he said, steady. "And you won't disappear?" Dominic knelt, meeting her eyes. "I don't disappear anymore." She nodded, letting go reluctantly. When the door closed behind her, Dominic stood there longer than necessary, hands shaking just slightly. He hated that she'd learned to ask that question. At night, when Lily slept, Dominic finally allowed himself to face the truth he'd been circling since the alley. He ordered the test. It arrived in a plain envelope. No dramatic music, no moment of hesitation. He opened it alone, standing by the window as snow fell softly over the estate grounds. Probability of paternity, 99.98%. Dominic exhaled slowly. There it was. Not a surprise. Not relief. Not fear. Responsibility. Emma hadn't lied when she said he didn't know. She'd lied when she decided he didn't deserve the choice. He didn't hate her for it. He understood. But understanding didn't erase the years Lily had spent learning how to be invisible. Dominic didn't tell Lily right away. Not because he was afraid of her reaction, but because he wanted to earn the word before it ever left her mouth. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. Dominic learned things he'd never trained for. How to sit through school plays without checking his phone. How to apologize when he raised his voice. How to cook something other than eggs without burning it. How to listen without fixing. Lily learned that anger didn't always end in abandonment, that when she dropped a glass no one yelled, that when she cried, someone stayed. One night a storm cut the power. Thunder shook the windows. Lily appeared in the hallway, clutching her blanket, eyes wide. Dominic opened his arms without thinking. She climbed into his lap as he sat by the window, lightning flashing outside. "I don't like loud," she murmured. "I know," he said. "Will the house fall?" "No." "Will you leave?" "No." She went quiet, then asked the question that changed everything. "Why do you take care of me like this?" Dominic felt the truth rise up, demanding honesty. He took a breath. "Because you matter." "That's not the reason," Lily said gently, as if correcting him. Dominic closed his eyes for a moment. "Because I should have been there sooner," he said. Lily leaned back to look at him. "You didn't know?" He nodded. "But now I do." She considered that carefully. "Does that mean you're, like, mine?" Dominic's chest tightened. "If you want me to be." She smiled then, small and certain. "I already thought you were." Dominic didn't cry. But something inside him finally broke open and let light in. The real test came a month later. An old associate resurfaced, threatening exposure, leverage, consequences, the kind of problem Dominic would have erased once without blinking. He didn't. He walked away. He shut down the last operation that could drag Lily's name into the dark. He burned bridges that had kept him powerful and dangerous and alone. When the man asked him why, Dominic answered simply, "Because someone is watching me now." That night, Dominic tucked Lily into bed. She held the compass necklace loosely, no longer gripping it like a lifeline. "What does it point to?" she asked sleepily. Dominic smiled faintly. "Home." She yawned. "Good." After she slept, Dominic stood in the doorway and understood something that scared him more than enemies ever had. He could lose everything, and still win. Because the man who'd once ruled fear now lived by a quieter law, and the child who'd been dumped like trash had become the center of a world rebuilt around her worth. The story wasn't over yet. But for the first time, Dominic Vale knew exactly how it was meant to end. Dominic Vale learned that peace had a sound. It wasn't silence. It was smaller than that. It was the steady rhythm of Lily's breathing through the baby monitor at night, the soft scrape of her chair against the kitchen floor in the morning, the quiet confidence in her voice when she corrected him about things he still got wrong. Peace was fragile. And Dominic protected it like he once protected territory. But the past doesn't disappear just because a man changes his address. It waits. The warning came from Luca, late one afternoon, voice tighter than usual. "Boss, there's chatter. Internal. Some of the old crew thinks you went soft. They think Lily is leverage. Dominic closed his eyes slowly. He had known this day would come. Names, he said. Luca hesitated. If I give them to you, you'll know what you'd have done before. Dominic opened his eyes. And you'll know what I'll do now. Luca exhaled. Evan Crowley, Marcus Venn, and a few others testing loyalty. Dominic nodded. Set a meeting. Neutral ground. Luca went quiet. With Lily. Nowhere near her, Dominic said sharply. She doesn't move, I do. That night, Dominic sat beside Lily as she coloured, her brow furrowed in concentration. You're leaving again, she said, not looking up. Yes. Are you coming back? Yes. She paused, then nodded and went back to her drawing. It showed a house, a tree, two figures holding hands, one smaller than the other. Dominic swallowed. The meeting took place in a private room above a closed restaurant. No weapons visible, no raised voices. Just men who remembered what Dominic Vale used to be. You're changing the rules, Evan Crowley said, leaning back. That makes people nervous. Dominic folded his hands calmly. Then they should pay attention. Marcus scoffed. You threw away leverage, territory. You gave hail to the feds for what, a kid? Dominic didn't flinch. For accountability. Silence followed. Not agreement. Calculation. Evan leaned forward. This life doesn't forgive weakness. Dominic stood. This life doesn't decide who I am anymore, he said. You want to keep playing the old game, do it somewhere else. But if you bring it anywhere near my family... Marcus laughed. Family? You really believe... Dominic's voice dropped, low and final. I don't believe, I know. The room shifted. They saw it then, not softness, resolve. Anyone who thinks Lily is leverage, Dominic continued, is confessing something about themselves. And I won't correct them twice. No threats. No violence. The meeting ended without a handshake. 2 weeks later, Marcus Venn was arrested on unrelated charges. Evan Crowley left the city quietly. The rest fell in line or disappeared. Not because Dominic destroyed them. Because he removed himself as their shield. At home, Lily sensed the tension easing. You're lighter, she said one evening, curled beside him on the couch. Dominic smiled faintly. You make good observations. Preschool teacher says that too. Dominic laughed quietly. The sound surprised both of them. That night he sat on the edge of Lily's bed, the DNA results folded in his pocket, heavy as a confession. He had waited long enough. There's something I want to tell you, he said. Lily sat up, serious immediately. Is it scary? No, Dominic said. It's important. He took a breath. I didn't know you when you were born. That wasn't your fault. And it wasn't because I didn't want you. Lily listened without interrupting. I should have been there sooner, Dominic continued. But now that I am, I want you to know that I'm not just taking care of you. He paused, then said it clearly. I'm your father. Lily blinked. She didn't cry. She didn't gasp. She smiled. Oh, she said softly. That makes sense. Dominic stared at her. It does? She nodded. You worry like one. And you stay. Something inside Dominic finally unclenched. Does that change anything? He asked quietly. Lily thought about it, then shook her head. No, you were already mine. She leaned forward and hugged him, small arms warm and certain. Dominic closed his eyes and held her, understanding at last that redemption didn't come from erasing the past. It came from staying in the present. Dominic Vale discovered that the most dangerous thing he had ever done was not crossing rival families, not betraying alliances, not handing a kingpin to the federal government. It was choosing to stay. Staying meant letting the past see where he lived now. Staying meant letting people notice what mattered to him. And in Dominic's world, what mattered was always used as leverage. The warning came quietly, the way real threats always did. Luca didn't burst in. He didn't raise his voice. He waited until Lily was asleep, until the house settled into its night rhythm, until Dominic was standing alone in the kitchen, staring at a cup of coffee that had gone cold. There's noise, Luca said finally. Old noise. Dominic didn't turn around. Define it. Men who remember who you used to be, Luca replied, and who don't like who you're becoming. Dominic nodded once. He had expected this. You didn't walk away from power without it snapping back at your heels. They're saying you've got a weakness, Luca continued carefully. They're saying you've got leverage now. Dominic's jaw tightened. They can say whatever they want. They're saying her name, Luca said. That did it. Dominic turned slowly, his expression unreadable. Whose? Luca hesitated, then answered. Enough people, that it matters. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The house felt too quiet, as if it were holding its breath. Names, Dominic said at last. Luca exhaled. Evan Crowley, Marcus Venn, a handful of others watching which way the wind blows. Men Dominic had once trusted. Men who had eaten at his table. Men who had survived because he'd decided they were useful. Dominic absorbed that without reaction. They want to test me. Yes. They want to see if I'll go back to who I was. Luca met his eyes. And if you don't? Dominic's voice was calm, but it carried weight. Then they'll have to decide whether they're brave enough to challenge who I am now. That night, Lily sensed the shift before anyone explained it to her. She was sitting on the living room floor, coloring carefully within the lines when she looked up and asked, "Are you mad?" Dominic sat beside her. "No. You're thinking loud," she said. He almost smiled. "I didn't know that was a thing." "It is," Lily replied confidently. "My teacher says you can hear it in people's shoulders." Dominic glanced down. She wasn't wrong. His shoulders were tense, coiled. "I have to go out tomorrow," he said. Lily didn't look surprised. "Work?" "Yes." "Danger work?" Dominic hesitated. He chose honesty, measured and gentle. "Talking work, with men who don't listen well." She nodded slowly. "Will you come back?" "Yes." "Same you?" she asked. The question landed harder than she knew. Dominic crouched so they were face to face. "I promise." She studied him for a long moment, then reached up and straightened his collar, an echo of something she'd seen adults do on television. "Okay," she said. "Then don't forget." The meeting took place the following evening, in a private room above a closed restaurant that still smelled faintly of oil and old wine. Neutral ground, no obvious weapons, just men and memory. Evan Crowley was already there, polished and calm, hands folded like he was attending a board meeting. Marcus Venn leaned against the wall, arms crossed, impatience written into his posture. Dominic entered alone. No entourage, no show. That alone unsettled them. "You're late," Marcus said. "No," Dominic replied evenly. "I'm on time." He took the seat at the head of the table without asking permission. The old hierarchy reasserted itself instinctively, and they all felt it. Evan cleared his throat. "Dominic, we asked for this meeting because there's concern." "About what?" "About direction," Evan said smoothly. "You've stepped back. You've changed the structure. You've let outsiders take down Hale. That created instability." Dominic nodded. "Hale created instability. I ended it." Marcus laughed, sharp and dismissive. "You ended a problem by handing it to the government. That's not how we used to do things." Dominic's gaze didn't waver. "That's why you're still alive." Silence settled over the table. Marcus pushed off the wall. "Let's stop pretending this is about business. You've got something to protect now, and that makes you predictable." Dominic leaned forward slightly. "Careful." "Why?" Marcus pressed. "Because I said the quiet part out loud? Everyone knows it." "The kid." The air went cold. Dominic stood. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't slam his hands on the table. He simply stood, and the room adjusted to him the way it always had. "You don't say her name," Dominic said calmly. "You don't think about her. You don't imagine her. Because the moment you do, you stop being a professional and start being a threat." Evan frowned. "Dominic, nobody is suggesting—" Dominic held up a hand. Evan stopped mid-sentence. "This is the only warning," Dominic continued. "I'm not weak because I changed, I'm precise, and anyone who confuses the two will remove themselves from my world one way or another." Marcus scoffed. "You're choosing a child over everything we built." Dominic met his eyes. "No. I'm choosing accountability over chaos." Marcus laughed again, but it sounded forced. "This life doesn't reward morality." Dominic's voice was quiet, final. "This life doesn't get to decide who I am anymore." The meeting ended without agreement, without threats, without reconciliation. That was worse. Within days, the consequences unfolded. Marcus Venn was arrested on financial crimes Dominic had once quietly buried. Evan Crowley moved his family overseas and stopped returning calls. The others recalculated, choosing distance over defiance, not because Dominic destroyed them, because he stepped out of the role that had protected them. At home, Lily noticed the absence before Dominic mentioned anything. "The phone is quieter," she said one evening as they ate dinner. "Yes," Dominic replied. "That's good," she decided. "Phones are noisy." That night, Dominic sat on the edge of Lily's bed longer than usual. The DNA report rested in his jacket pocket, folded and unfolded so many times the paper was soft. He had waited because he wanted certainty, not about biology, but about himself. "Lily," he said gently. She rolled onto her side, eyes bright. "What?" "There's something important I want to tell you." She sat up immediately. "Is it a secret?" "Yes," Dominic said, "but only for a moment." He took a breath. "When you were born, I didn't know about you. That wasn't your fault. And it wasn't because I didn't want you." Lily listened carefully, as if filing the words somewhere safe. "I should have been there sooner," Dominic continued, "but now that I am, I want you to know that I'm not just someone taking care of you." He paused, then said it plainly. "I'm your father." Lily blinked. Then she tilted her head. "Like, for real?" "Yes." She thought about that, serious and quiet. Then she smiled, small and sure. "That makes sense," she said. Dominic felt something in his chest loosen that he hadn't known was knotted. "Does it change anything?" he asked softly. She shook her head. "No. You already did dad things." She leaned forward and hugged him, arms warm, trusting, complete. Dominic held her and understood something that no amount of power had ever taught him. The real danger wasn't losing control. It was finally knowing what he couldn't afford to lose and choosing to protect it anyway. Chapter 8, Rewritten. Final chapter. Dominic Vale had always thought the end would come with a reckoning. Not redemption, not peace, a reckoning. In his mind, endings were loud things. They arrived with slammed doors, raised voices, consequences that demanded witnesses. Even when he imagined paying for the life he had lived, he pictured it happening in public, under lights, with no room left to hide. Instead, the end of one life and the beginning of another came quietly, on an ordinary morning, with the smell of coffee filling the kitchen, and a 4-year-old girl humming to herself as she colored at the table. Lily had developed a habit of humming when she felt safe. Dominic noticed these things now. He noticed everything. The way she chose the same blue crayon first, the way she lined the edges of the paper before filling it in, the way she glanced up at him every few minutes, not because she needed help, but because she needed confirmation. He was still there. Dominic stood by the counter watching her, the weight of years pressing down on him with a strange softness. The city outside the windows was awake, but distant. Phones buzzed less these days. Names that once demanded his attention had faded into background noise. Power had a way of shrinking when it was no longer fed. He had let it go deliberately. After Victor Hale's arrest, there had been a vacuum. People expected Dominic to fill it, to rise again, to assert control the way he always had. Instead, he stepped back. He closed operations quietly. He handed management to men who wanted stability more than dominance. He cooperated where he once resisted. He disappeared from rooms that had once fallen silent when he entered. Some called it weakness. Dominic called it alignment. Every decision now passed through a single question he never used to ask. Would this follow Lily home? If the answer was yes, or even maybe, he didn't do it. That filter changed everything. The final echo of the old world arrived in the form of a letter, slid under the gate one afternoon while Lily was at school. No threats, no names, just an offer written in careful language by people who believed they understood men like Dominic Vale. They wanted his experience, his strategy, his ability to stabilize chaos without drawing attention. They offered distance, protection, clean money, and a new beginning far from the city that knew his name. It was the kind of offer he once would have accepted without hesitation, a controlled exit, influence without exposure, power without fingerprints. Dominic read the letter twice. Then he folded it neatly and placed it in a drawer beneath old documents he would never open again. When Lily came home that day, she was quieter than usual. Dominic noticed immediately. He always did now. He knelt in front of her, setting his phone aside. What happened? She hesitated, twisting the strap of her backpack around her fingers. A boy said something. Dominic waited. He had learned not to rush her. He said, "I don't have a real family," Lily continued softly. "He said dads don't just show up later." The words were simple. The damage wasn't. Dominic felt anger rise, sharp, instinctive, familiar. The old Dominic would have acted on it without pause. The new Dominic breathed through it and stayed exactly where he was. "What did you say?" he asked. Lily shrugged. "I said I do have a family." And then, she looked up at him. "Then I thought about it." That worried him more than the boy's words. "And? I think families are the people who stay," she said, "not the ones who are supposed to." Dominic pulled her into his arms, holding her longer than usual, grounding himself in the reality of her weight, her warmth, her certainty. "You're right," he said quietly, "and anyone who doesn't understand that just hasn't learned enough yet." That night, Dominic went into his office for the last time. The room still smelled faintly of leather and paper. The walls still held the ghosts of conversations that had shaped cities. He turned on the lamp and opened drawers he had avoided for months. He didn't linger. He burned what needed burning, deleted what no longer served a purpose, closed accounts that tied his name to fear instead of responsibility. He dismantled the last structure that could drag Lily's life into shadows she didn't deserve, not out of guilt, out of clarity. When he was finished, he shut off the light, closed the door, and never opened it again. Weeks passed. Life settled into something steady and unfamiliar. Lily learned to ride a bike. Dominic learned to attend school meetings without checking his watch. They argued about bedtime and vegetables. They laughed at things that didn't matter. Peace, Dominic learned, wasn't silence. It was consistency. The last moment came unexpectedly, the way real endings often do. They were walking through the park at dusk, the same one where Lily had once swung while Dominic scanned rooftops and exits. This time he didn't. He pushed her on the swing higher than he used to, listening to her laughter stretch into the cooling air. "Higher," she demanded. "That's enough," he said, smiling. "No," she replied confidently. "I trust you." The words struck him harder than any threat ever had. Later they sat on a bench, Lily leaning against his side, the compass necklace resting against her chest. She held it up, turning it slowly. "What does it point to now?" she asked. Dominic considered the question. "For a long time," he said, "it pointed to things I thought I needed. Control, safety, distance. And now?" He looked at her, at the quiet path ahead, at a future that no longer felt like a negotiation. "Now it points forward," he said, "to where we're going." Lily smiled, satisfied. "Good. Years from now, people would still whisper Dominic Vale's name. Some would remember him as a criminal who vanished, others as a man who dismantled an empire without a war. Few would insist he was still dangerous. They would all be right in different ways. Dominic Vale didn't stop being dangerous. He changed what he protected. He redirected every sharp instinct, every calculated move, every ounce of control towards something that couldn't defend itself alone. A child who had once been left on a pile of clothes in the street. A girl who had learned too early how to be invisible. She grew up knowing, without question, that she mattered, that she was chosen, that she was never disposable. And that was the ending. Not loud, not bloody, not witnessed by the world, but complete. What did you think of the story? Subscribe to the channel and share it with someone who will also be moved today.